Well, you heard a little bit about me. I'm from Iowa. I've had several people say, Iowa? Where's that? When I travel, sometimes I'll say, you know, there's Idaho and Ohio, and Iowa is in the middle. And we love Maine. When I was growing up, my next door neighbor was an older bachelor, and he ended up marrying a lady from Maine. And she was quite a bit younger than him, but they called her Tiger. And she really was a tiger, but she ran a bed and breakfast in Searsport called Watch Type. And she's passed on now, but we would often drive to Maine and come and see her and visit. So Maine is near and dear to my heart, but it's very much different than Iowa's. Anybody ever been to Iowa? Oh, a lot of people have. It's flat and it's square. So instead of like the trees where you can't even see the road when you fly in, it looks like a patchwork quilt, because there'll be like corn in this field and beans in they all look different. So it's very different, but they're both very beautiful. This slide is a reminder to us of what we've lost in the 44 years since Roe v. Wade, January 22nd, 1973. It's taken us to a place that I don't think anybody could have imagined at that time, and we're going to talk more about that today. So one of my favorite quotes is from Ronald Reagan. If you're ever in a little spat with somebody who is in favor of abortion, you can say, well, your mom must have been pro-life. Right? Because you're here. You know, your mom had to choose life for you. And that usually shuts them right up. Actually, I work for a little pregnancy center now in Storm Lake. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But we have this quote on the back of our shirts. And so if you wear that in an airport, you will get some interesting comments. And people will approach you, sometimes in a very nice way, like you might get upgraded to first class, and other times you may get kicked off the plane. Not quite that bad, but pretty close. So when does life begin? We're going to talk about that from a gospel viewpoint. If you're a Christian, you do believe, that life begins at conception, and that we're all unique. But you may encounter people that don't believe in God at all. And what are you going to say to them? So we're going to try to make it today so you have your elevator speech. So if you run into somebody and they say, what are you doing? Well, I'm going to a pro-life meeting. Ooh, why are you pro-life? I support Planned Parenthood. You're going to have in your head already, like, oh, this is why I'm pro-life. And how you can convey that to someone who disagrees with you in a kind and respectful manner. So a little bit about myself before we get started. You heard that I have 5 kids. There's 4 girls and 1 boy. We do drama at our house with all the girls. But the one on the right there is Kim, and that's the one that's with me today. Wave. That's Kim. She told her colleagues at work that she was going to Maine for the night. I'll be back tomorrow. Because we flew in last night and we leave tonight. So it's kind of a big trip, but it's very fun. And she doesn't get to come very often, so she was excited. Kim is what's called an agronomist, and that is the study of agriculture. And when she said she has a master's degree in agronomy, and I'm like, isn't that like studying dirt? You know? And she said, Mom, it's soil. And Iowa has very rich soil and lots of cropland, and Kim's job at work is to help the land be as productive as possible with keeping in mind ecology and making it not GMO, or, you know, as best as she can. So that's her job. She's an outdoor girl. She loves hunting and fishing and the Second Amendment. She loves her Second Amendment, so don't cross her. The one on the left, the blonde one?
No, not right now.
No. He said, has she got one on her right now? She would have gotten on the plane. Actually, we were going through screening, and I'm up there putting my stuff on, and I have like this friendly face, and they're always like, go on through, go on through. I turn around, she's spread eagle. And I'm like, do you have a scissors or something in your bag? So anyway, the one on the right there is Kristen, and she goes to the other university in Iowa, and so there's a little rivalry there. She goes to University of Iowa. She's a nurse. She would never dream of shooting a gun or being outside or growing anything. And so they're very opposite. The one in the back there is Desi. She is 14 and homeschooling for the first time this year, so I'm learning a lot about being a homeschool mom, and it's not as easy as I thought it would be. Imagine that. We probably have some homeschoolers in here. And the little one there is Zoe. She's 7. And I know that if you look at me, you think, she's really old to have a 7-year-old. And sometimes I'll have people say, oh, your granddaughter's so cute, you know. And the first time I was like, ouch. And now I just smile and say, thank you. So, and here is Zoe on her goat. The goat is easy. And Zoe's story is unique. She came to our home when she was 3 months old. You heard that I do foster care, and that's how I got the last 3 kids, was through adoption, through the Department of Human Services. But Zoe was 3 months old, and her mom was 17 and not doing very well. A lot of drug use and poor choices. So they wanted mom and baby to come to our home for 3 months until mom turned 18 and basically learn how to be a better parent. And I said, what if mom doesn't take the baby when she turns 18 because I'm too old to adopt, you know, another baby? And they said, well, she's Native American, so the tribe will take her. So I thought, oh, okay, because I love babies, love babies. And so we got her, and we had her mom, and sure enough, mom turned 18, took off. And I'm thinking, uh-oh. And then the tribe came to our house, and I thought the chance of us getting permission from the Rosebud Sioux tribe to adopt this sweet little Native American baby is like slim to none. And they were like, keep her. So I won't tell you exactly how old I was when I adopted her. But she's 7, and my oldest 2 daughters were like, do you know how old you're going to be when she graduates? And I'm like, yeah. I said, if it's really bad, we'll just call the ambulance to take me straight to the nursing home for commencement. But so far, I'm holding up. Actually, I think she keeps me young. That is my son, Kevin. He's not triplets. There is only one of him. But he likes Photoshop. And so he'll sit outside or in some room and I know. He'll take a bunch of different pictures and then he puts them all in one screen. So like at Christmas, like I think 2 years ago, he put like on 17 different outfits and took his place like around the tree and on the couch. And then there's like 17 deaths. And I said, I love you, buddy, but perish the thought of there being 17 of you. But he likes music. He sings all the time. Like, Kevin, quit singing. Kevin, I'm on the phone, you know, whatever. He loves to sing, and he loves video. He aspires to be a wedding videographer.
Beautiful.
So believe it or not, he was going to be a Marine, and his biological mother had bad feet. So he cannot be a Marine. So I'm like, a Marine or a wedding videographer? Help me understand that. So he's an interesting guy. So that brings me to the start of the Planned Parenthood part of my story. I started there in 1991. And Storm Lake is just a very small town, 10,000 people. You know everybody there, everybody knows you. Planned Parenthood had a fairly good reputation. They didn't do abortions. It was close to my house, and they had great pay. So I applied there thinking that I was really going to be helping women. And alas, took me a long time to really come to terms with all that goes on there. But I remember during my interview process, the regional director said, "What do you think of our surgical services?" And I grew up in a secular home. I didn't even really know what abortion was. And I said, "What surgical services?" And she says, "Well, we do abortions at our Des Moines Center." And I said, "Ew, I think that's murder." And she said, "Well, it's not really murder unless the fetus is viable." And I'd had 2 kids. And I said, I think there's a heartbeat there, isn't there? You know, like a month out or so? I didn't know. I mean, it was before technology, and I hadn't taken time to look anything like that up. But she said, "Well, we're going to have to agree to disagree." And I thought, I'm probably not going to get that job. I already disrespected the big boss. But I figured they probably had no one else apply, because they did hire me, and they regret it today. Because this is kind of what I do. So anyway, it's really my passion to speak the truth about it. And I didn't know that I was going to ever do this. Like if somebody would have told me, "Oh, you're going to travel and you're going to, talk about your experiences at Planned Parenthood," I would have laughed out loud. But when I ended up getting fired from Planned Parenthood, but when they fired me, they gave me this packet of information, and in it was a severance package. And during my years there, I'd known many managers that had been fired, but never one that had been offered a severance package. So that seemed kind of weird to me, but they must have known more than me that I was going to do this, because they tried to silence me. And if I would have signed that, I could have not confirmed or denied that I even worked there. So I had the presence of mind, it was probably the Holy Spirit, saying, "Don't sign it, don't sign it." And they even extended the offer so that I had like 2 or 3 months to sign this. They'd call me and say, "Why don't you sign that?" And I was like, "I'm just not sure." And so I didn't. But I'm very thankful that I didn't, because I wouldn't have been able to say a word about any of this. So I started there within a short time of becoming the manager. They sent me to Des Moines to follow around staff in the abortion unit. So that was really my first exposure to anything regarding abortion, and it was a long and ugly day. I had my 2 little girls at home, and I saw firsthand really what abortion is. And I knew it would be bad, but I really wasn't prepared for how awful. If you've ever looked at the pictures, online or seen the horrible signs, it's just like that. But I remember them standing me against the wall and saying, "Stay here." And they did the first one. I said, "Why do I have to stand by the wall?" And they said, "Usually people pass out." And so I didn't. But over the course of the day, I got around so I could be at the foot of the bed and actually see the procedure. To this day, the sound, like if you walk into a dentist's office of that suction machine, takes me right back. And the jar, there's a glass jar, and they'll suck the baby out, and it goes in the jar. The doctor enters the room and it's all dark. I asked, "Why is it dark? Why do they keep it dark?" "Well, she doesn't want anybody to see her face." So she comes around to the foot of the bed, never speaks to the patient, does the procedure, which takes 4 or 5 minutes, sticks the jar through this little door into the dirty utility lab. She goes on to the next one. So the staff go around, get this jar out, take this big glass jar, just like an iced tea jar, dump it in a Rubbermaid colander, rinse it, get this big hose thing and rinse it, put it in a little glass jar, and then piece it back together to see if they got all the parts. And I remember saying, "Isn't that 3 arms? Little tiny arms?" And the staff member training me said, "Oh yeah, it was twins." And I said, "Oh, do you tell the mom?" She said, "No, it usually just upsets them." So over the course of that first day, my first experience in the abortion unit, we probably saw 30, maybe 35. is boom, boom, boom through there. So I drove home from there knowing what a horrible thing it was, but thinking maybe I can help. Maybe I can help people not become pregnant and not choose abortion. And so that's really what I did for the next 17 years, was try to educate people. I was a sexuality educator for Planned Parenthood. I worked all over Northwest Iowa, going into schools. And I think sometimes teachers wanted me to come because they didn't want to stand up there and talk about condoms and birth control and AIDS and sexually transmitted infections. So it was easier for them to have anybody else come in so that they didn't have to do it. And Planned Parenthood loved when I would make connection with the schools. Their main goal really is to separate teenagers from their parents. It was my job to say, we're confidential, you can come in the back door, we'll never tell your mom or dad, even if they call, we'll never tell them that you were here. And so if they weren't having sex already, I was the person that they could go to. If they had questions, call me. If you need help, call me. And I was good at it. And to this day, I mean, Kim and Kristen would probably tell you, I don't want to put you on the spot, but they would probably tell you that was hard for them, because I did sex ed in their school, you know. Have you ever heard of Melissa Oden? Yes. She is an abortion survivor. Her mom tried to abort her at, I don't know, 33 weeks or something. She survived. That was in Sioux City, Iowa. She survived because of one nurse. Beautiful woman, very beautiful woman, inside and out. The abortion, the saline abortion, did not burn her skin like it typically does. But she was adopted by a family in Storm Lake. And we were at a speaking event together, and she came up to me and she goes, Sue, did you know that you did sex ed when I was in health class in Storm Lake High School? And I was just like, oh, I'm sorry. And she said, no, it's okay. She goes, it's kind of weird, don't you think? I was like, yeah, it is kind of weird. And then her husband, Ryan, comes up to me and he goes, I was in there too. I said, oh, okay, sorry. I've apologized a lot for the bad things I've done. So, fast forward a little bit in Planned Parenthood, 2007. So I've been there all this time. I'm a very successful employee. My clinic made a lot of money. Bottom line was always healthy. I was Employee of the Month many times over. I was in good standing. We're at a manager's meeting, and upper management announces this new thing that they're going to do, webcam abortion. And when they would talk about abortion, I would kind of zone out, because we only did family planning stuff at my clinic. But I heard him say, and we're going to be doing this at every center. And it kind of snapped me awake, and I was like, what? You're going to be doing what? And they said, webcam abortion. So they went on to explain that our doctor, the abortionist, would sit in Des Moines at her computer. We had 17 centers in Iowa. So whenever a client came into any one of those 17 centers all across Iowa, the staff could do a urine pregnancy test, 3 minutes. If it was positive, we could say to the woman, you're pregnant. But we can take care of the problem for you today. 35 minutes in and out, 45 minutes in and out, all you have to do is take a pill. Iowa doesn't have a waiting period, so it's real easy to catch them on that knee-jerk reaction, you know, and say, it's not a big deal, just take these pills and the baby will be gone. Not baby, of course they never say baby. So I felt like that was a really bad idea. I mean, I live in a small town where everyone knows me. I defended Planned Parenthood. You know, it's a good place. We do pap smears for women that probably wouldn't get them otherwise because the doctors won't see them because they don't have any money. And so I defended Planned Parenthood. Well, suddenly I was going to be doing these webcam abortions. So the doctor's at her terminal, and she sees the client via this Skype-like connection. And I'm thinking, that's all bad, you know, all bad. Well, then come to find out, non-medical staff, like the center manager and the clinic assistants, are going to be doing webcam transvaginal ultrasounds. So ladies, if you've ever had that, you know it's an invasive procedure. Men, if you think prostate check, it's along those lines. It's invasive. And you don't really want the person that answers the phone and schedules your appointment to do that, right? It's okay to laugh. It really is. It's like, but that's what was going to happen. So I was going to be sent to Sioux City, about an hour away, and I was going to be trained to do them, and then I had to go back and train my staff. So I am becoming more and more, well, even in this meeting, vocal about it. I said, what about a person that has complications? And the FDA had approved this through day 49 of pregnancy. There's a lot of stuff that can happen, you know, day 49. And I'm like, I'm in the phone book. You know, these ladies are going to be bleeding at night and calling me on my home phone in the middle of the night, because I'm the one that was there. And they said, it's not a big deal. You know, they can go to ER if they're having trouble. I said, what about, you know, don't you have to have like a bachelor's degree to run a sonography machine? And my boss said, Todd, who was a project manager, said, if you are breathing, you can do this. It helps if you've played a video game, because it's a lot like running a joystick. I am not kidding. So I left there thinking, I'm going to get fired. I'm not going to do. I knew I was not going to do it, because I already had enough to account to God for as it is. And I was not a strong Christian at this point. So I knew I wasn't going to do it. I went home and told my kids, you know, I'm probably going to get fired, and I'm single. I said, we're probably not going to be able to stay here, but I wanted them to have the real picture. And they were cool with it. They're like, it's okay. You know, it's all right. You do what you need to do. So over the course of the next months, they rolled webcam abortion out all across Iowa. And Storm Lake was the last center to go live. And I'm hearing my colleagues, the other center managers, say all this bad stuff. Since we started doing this, all we do are occurrence reports, because there's so many problems. And they immediately were doing it to day 63. The FDA said day 49. Planned Parenthood is doing them through day 63. So 2 weeks past what the FDA approved. And I remember being at my doctor, and I said, have you ever heard of this? You know, because I kept thinking, I've got to tell somebody. Who do I tell? So I tell my doctor, and he said, oh boy, that is a recipe for disaster. And I asked my boss, are you going to tell the doctors in these communities where we're doing these that they're going to probably be seeing women in the ER? And he goes, oh no. No, because at that point it's not really any different than a miscarriage. So they weren't going to notify any medical communities in these small towns in Iowa that they were going to be doing this. So during this time in my personal life, I am in a mess. And I mean, if you're running a Planned Parenthood, your life is a mess. You know, there's probably nobody here that's running a Planned Parenthood, so I can say that freely. But it's hard. I mean, it's a hard place. And I grew up in a denominational church, kind of, where towards the end of my time at Planned Parenthood, the pastor there said, when you guys start doing abortions, can I come down and escort the women in? And I was still working there. But I'm thinking, aren't you supposed to be on the other side of this? But it kind of helped my brain to like perk up and think, wait, you better start thinking about this. And over the years that I was there, probably 10,000 different people said, do you think you should be there? Or, you know, and asked me questions that maybe put me another little step closer to finally thinking, I probably shouldn't be here. So it takes many, many times of hearing it when your heart has become so hard that you think that ripping a baby to pieces in its mother's womb is okay. So it's a process that I went through. So anyway, I ended up, we're driving down the road one day, and we're flipping through the channels. This is Iowa, so you can go like almost all the way through the whole radio before you find a station. Really, there's not that many stations there. And I don't know why I never heard it before, but there was this Christian radio station. And the second this song came on, I felt like it was for us, and it touched my heart. And I started thinking about that song, I ended up buying a radio and taking it into Planned Parenthood so that I could get Christian radio while I was working. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but I would listen to it, and then if somebody would come in, I'd turn it down. And then I'd turn it back up. And then if they'd have some kind of interview about right to life, or the announcer would say something about abortion, I'd just turn it off. Because I didn't want to hear that. I wanted to be justified, and I wanted to rationalize what I was doing, because I'm really helping these women. But finally, one day, in Planned Parenthood, I heard Jay, the announcer, do this interview with Iowa Right to Life. And I was like, that's who I need to call, is Iowa Right to Life, because somebody needs to know that they're doing these webcam abortions. So I called Iowa Right to Life from Planned Parenthood. And I remember whispering, like, I'm inside of Planned Parenthood. Oh, thanks. I'll share with you. Okay. And I think they had a hard time believing that I was really there, because they probably don't get very many calls from people working in Planned Parenthood. But I ended up telling them what a webcam abortion is. And I know it was hard for them to really believe it, but I started sending protocols and information about webcam abortion, how it's done, what their plans for it were, how they were going to roll out, all of this. So I'm sharing this information. I didn't share any private client information, but it felt good to me to be able to pass that on to them. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm going to do the right thing. They're going to fix it. So ultimately, during that time of the webcam startup thing, employees were saying, how are you going to fund this fancy webcam thing? And they said, well, we have a large donor, Warren Buffett. He's going to buy all we have some pregnancy center ladies here. Where are you? Okay, you know what it's like to fundraise for an ultrasound machine. Mm-hmm. Well, Mr. Buffett just generously purchased 17 4D, state-of-the-art, brand new, hot off the press, little ultrasound machines. All the computers, fiber optics, webcams, everything. So during some of the last days that I was there, I remember the GE ultrasound delivery truck pulling up. It said GE on it. And the guy gets out, and he rolls this little machine down a ramp. He brings it in. He goes, where do you want it? I said, just put it in the back room. He goes, I need to show you how it works. He was all excited about it. And I said, no, I don't really want to see it. Because I knew I wasn't going to do it. But he insisted, so I went back. And he's showing me all these bells and whistles and buttons, and he's really excited about it. When he gets to the one that says print, the button says print. And for the first time, he stopped, and he looked at me, our eyes met, and he said, for what you use this for, you're probably not going to print a picture, are you? And I said, no, sir. Planned Parenthood will never print a picture of a baby. They'll actually turn the screen away, because they know, we heard it here earlier today, 9 out of 10 women that see that heartbeat or that little tiny spine on there realize that it's a baby, and they don't go through with it, and Planned Parenthood loses that sale. But what they do call that baby or fetus is products of conception, contents of uterus, a heavy period. You may see some tissue. That's what they say. Well, after they started doing the webcam abortions, there would be women that would see this little 63-day baby, put it in a Ziploc bag, and bring it back in, and say, you did not tell me it was a baby. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, I got fired. You heard that part of it. And I'd never been fired before, so it was a little bit scary. But in all honesty, if you have to be fired, that's a good place to be fired from. Amen? Can I get an amen? And somehow, I mean, I was working, a couple part-time jobs, and I was just really enjoying being out of that daily oppression. Just that weight, and I knew what I was doing was wrong. And by this time I was in a Bible-believing church, and they loved me when I worked at Planned Parenthood, and they loved me when I got fired. You know, it was that welcoming love of Jesus Christ that really, I think, saved my life, along with the Christian radio station, got me back on the right track. And I'm just so thankful for that. But once I was fired, for 2 years, I didn't talk to anybody. Because I thought, you know, I've told Iowa Right to Life, it's all good. They're going to fix it. Well, they didn't. I mean, you can't fix this. It's big. And I kept hearing about women that had been in there and so forth. Finally, our town, Storm Lake, was having this vacation Bible school with like 4 churches. And this took several years to work up to this, because our churches had never done anything together. But there's all these churches having this vacation Bible school. This retired missionary, 40 years in Japan, comes up to me and he says, "Can you tell me about Planned Parenthood?" And I said, "Oh, you don't want to know." He goes, "Yeah, I really do." So I told him what a webcam abortion was. And I saw the horror on his face, and I felt so convicted. Because for all this time, I had been an ostrich with my head in the sand and let this go on. They started doing these 2 weeks after they fired me. And this was going on Erie Street, and I hadn't said a word. So Alan and I figured out we would get 5 or 6 strong pro-life people together, the ones that were down at Planned Parenthood when I was working there. They were on the sidewalk. Those were the people that we called because we knew that they weren't afraid to stand up. You know the people I mean. You're in here. And I told them, and I felt that same horror, that conviction, because I could see it on their faces. And they said, "What can we do?" And I said, "Well, there's this thing called 40 Days for Life, and I don't know much about it, but Planned Parenthood hates it. So it must be pretty good." They would call it like 40 Days of Hell, or 40 Days of Torture, and they would call, Planned Parenthood calls their donors when there's somebody outside praying and says, "We have a couple crazies here, do you want to pledge $10 per picketer?" So they try to turn that into a fundraising op.
They do it here too.
Yeah, it's crazy, but they do that. So I looked it up online. It was like the last day to sign up, and God said, "Put it on your visa. There's like a little charge to sign up." I'm like, "Lord, are you sure? Really?" He said, "Yeah." So I did, and I emailed my 5 or 6 friends. This is what I did. I don't know why, but I did it. So we're going to be having a 40 Days for Life. This was the fall of 2011, and we had about 6 weeks to get ready. So we met like once a week. People would come, new people, and I'd share what a webcam abortion was, and it got a little bit easier for me to talk about. But I'm thinking, this is never going to work. So you're supposed to put the hours for the 40 Days campaign in the computer so people can sign up online. It makes it real easy. I am technologically challenged, had no idea. So I had to call 40 Days for Life and say, "Can you help me?" And the lady that answered, her name is Lauren, and she said, "Well, what hours do you want to put in?" And I said, "Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from noon to 5, because that's when they're open. And that's how many hours I think we can fill a week is 15. And she said, "Well," she was very nice, but she goes, "You know, they usually do those 24 hours a day." And I said, "Have you ever been to Iowa?" There's not that many people here. And I had a list, really, of why that wouldn't work. We have no money, we have no signs, we don't know what we're doing. I'm in charge of it. It's not going to work. And she said words to me that inspired me in such a way that I've never forgotten it. But she said, "Sue, why would you limit God?" And I rolled my eyes, and I was like, "Oh, okay, fine." So I put it in from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And we had never done anything close to this in Storm Lake. I started calling people, friends that I knew that would be supportive, and saying, "Can you go down to Planned Parenthood and pray for an hour?" And I would get like, "Pray for an hour? What do you want me to talk about for an hour, you know, to God?" Well, the night before the start, we had a kickoff down there, and that was really scary for me because I knew we had 2 newspapers in town, and they'd covered a lot of Planned Parenthood stuff, and me, and they hadn't always been very nice. And now here I am doing this, and I'm thinking they're going to be there, and this is going to be awful. But we went down there, and we had 75 people show up. I know. Amen. God is good. But they call it Storm Lake because the wind always blows. It's real windy, and we have the big wind turbines. I mean, we have corn, beans, pigs, and wind. Those are the four big things, really. We make electricity there. And that night, there was no wind. And somebody brought those little candles, you know, that you have in church, and we lit those candles and sang Jesus Loves Me and Amazing Grace. And I was like, this might work. So the next morning, Zoe and I, she's little, we were going to go down there and start. 7 in the morning, somebody was already there. So I pulled into my spot where I'd parked for all those years. It was really weird. And I was like, God, I'm here. I think I'll just pray from in my van. Because you hear me from in here the same as if I'm out there on the sidewalk, right, God? And he said, get out. Get out of your van. So I did. I think my biggest fear was really seeing my former coworkers, you know, because I knew they thought I'd lost my mind. And I thought, maybe I have. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe I've lost my mind. But I got out there, and Zoe and I mean, we were there every day. And we prayed and prayed, and my former coworkers did have some choice words for me, but I was just able to say, you know, God loves you, and He's got a good plan for your life, Jean. You know, don't give up. And I was able to speak that into them before they slammed the door and waved with their middle finger. You know, but it's still good, right? Right. So, all those days down there, we would have, now I don't want to offend anybody here, it doesn't matter what church you go to, but in Storm Lake, I know there's no Storm Lakers here, so I can speak freely about them. we would have the Catholics over here, and the Protestants over here, and the crazy evangelicals over here. And they're all calling me going, do you know how these people pray? It is not normal. All three groups were. And so I was like, Lord, they're children. Can you help? And somehow we got rid of all the devotional material, and we decided to have a Bible there. And that worked, because they could pick up the Bible and they could read out of there. And we decided, we read Psalm 139 so many times on that sidewalk in front of Planned Parenthood that we called it holy ground, you know? And by the end of the 40 days, all the groups were together. And they're friends to this day, you know? Amen! That's a big amen right there. But we do a lot of things together now that are pro-life and evangelical, just because we all get along. So, webcam abortion done by medical staff. There is no follow-up for care. And I don't really have time to go into all the details, but the FDA approves it a certain way, and Planned Parenthood does it their own way. They skip the second visit. They change up the dosages for the pills because they want to use the very cheapest pills. They will tell you the 45 minutes in and out thing, that's a lie. It is not that simple. And you heard Teresa say, you know, they can be very drawn out, very bloody, very difficult. And women will think that there's a lot of cramping with it, a lot of discomfort, but they will always say, this is a lot safer than giving birth. I mean, that's a pat answer, a lot safer than giving birth. So I should tell you just one short story, well, I'll get to it, I think, about how we've tried to stop it. So we do them past the cutoff date in Iowa. Now they do them to day 70. So if you look up a 10-week, what a 10-week baby looks like, they will see that baby when they're cramping and bleeding. They will see it, almost always. They change up the medication, they skip the visit. They are always interested in the bottom line. So in Iowa, we have tried legislatively. We have done signatures. We've got 30,000 signatures on a petition, taken them in. We have a pro-life governor. I mean, we've tried all these things, and we have yet to actually ban them. But the last thing we tried was a hearing with the Iowa Board of Medicine. That's 7 doctors and 2 lay people that govern all things medical in the state. So this was pretty early on when I had started kind of speaking about webcam abortion and so forth. But they wanted me to come and share what I knew about webcam abortion at this hearing. And it was down at the State House, and I was past nervous. We walked in, and there's like 4 or 5 of my former bosses, Todd and Jill and Penny and Dr. Ross and Dr. Haskell. And I saw them, and I did this. And I left. I wish I could say that I was this icon of faith, but if you look back at my life, you will see 2 heel marks where they have been dug into the sand, and I've been going, no, not me. But Iowa Right to Life was with me. They came out and they said, you have got to do this because you're the only one that knows about it. And I literally looked down to see if I could see my heart beating because it was that bad. And by the time I finally had to sign in, by the time I finally signed the paper to speak, I was like one of the last ones. And I thought, maybe I won't have to talk. Because they're going to run out of time, and I won't have to get up there. So we went in and sat down, and all these Planned Parenthood people are getting up there. And the doctors on the board are saying things like, when did this start? How did you come up with the idea? How many have you done? Have you ever had a complaint? And they're saying, no, no complaints, no complications. And I'm sitting in my seat, and I'm just getting, like, it's not really angry, just like bold. And the only thing I had was a little piece of paper from the bedside, you know, the hotel room, that little tiny square. So I'm making notes on there so that when I get up there, I don't forget anything. But the fear left. And this holy boldness really came, and I got up there, and in my 3 minutes, I was able to pretty much, you know, there's been a lot of complications. Does a baby in a Ziploc bag, does that count as a complication? You know, they came up with this stupid idea of webcam abortion because their abortion doctor doesn't want to travel from Des Moines to Council Bluffs to Sioux City to Spencer to Ames to Iowa City, all these cities around the state. So this is a way for her to stay at her desk and play solitaire. And women can get abortions. And they thought of it because of CSI. They watched something on there with telemedicine. And so they thought, why couldn't we do that with abortions? So the Iowa Board of Medicine within 24 hours banned it, which was a good thing. But what does Planned Parenthood do if they get a ruling they don't like?
Appeal it.
They appeal it. So they appealed it. The district court upheld. He said, you know, if the doctors are saying it's not a good idea, I'm with them. So Planned Parenthood appealed it again to the Iowa Supreme Court, who are a bunch of mamby-pamby ninnies. Sorry, there's no Supreme Court. They are, I'm sorry. One of them has a wife that's on the board at Planned Parenthood. I mean, they're very liberal, and they're very activist, you know, so it was a bad thing. So it continues to this day. There is our St. Mary's Catholic school kids down at Planned Parenthood praying, kind of like wolves at the door. You know, they were praying. They all learned about what a webcam abortion was. I can tell you Planned Parenthood does not like that. When there's prayer outside, there's chaos inside. Because that darkness that goes on in there can't stand in the light of Jesus. So prayer matters. And you can pray from your car, but it's really better if you get out. There we were one Sunday after church. All the churches, you know, some people from all the churches would come down. The kids would leave lovely little sidewalk messages in chalk for the workers coming the next day. It was during one of these times that I think it was Father Jeremy said, we want this place to close. And I said, well, it's not going to close. During his prayer, I said that. Because they signed a 15-year lease right before I left, and their rent is $1,500 a month. So they're going to be here. Another pastor said, and we want a pro-life center in Storm Lake. And I said, that'll never happen. We don't have any money or in place or anything. So my faith was not even as big as a mustard seed at that point. But lo and behold, what happened was it closed. And I remember a friend calling me saying, Sue, I just heard Planned Parenthood is closing. And I was like, no, they're not closing. I can't believe it. I mean, I said I can't believe it. I don't even know how many times. My pastor finally said, if God answers your prayer, don't say, I can't believe it. So I was like, okay, I got that. So I don't say that anymore. We've heard some stuff about Planned Parenthood. They're 101 years old. They receive, I think 2 years ago, it was $542 million taxpayer dollars in exchange for 333,964 abortions. We pay an industry to kill our babies. Does that make sense? And they think they're above the law. Like, I mean, when I do this, you guys are pro-life. You've probably had some persecution. But I mean, I just had a neighbor. We've lived just around the corner from each other for 30 years and known her for 40 years. And she's a blazing liberal. I mean, it was ugly, and she finally blocked me on Facebook. And I'm thinking, you know, Deb has been a friend forever and ever, and now she's gone. But I've gained so much more. You know, being on the right side is invaluable. And if somebody is going to wave with their middle finger or delete you off of Facebook, you are doing the right thing. You are doing the right thing. If you've never gone to numberofabortions.com, you should. It has a rolling number for how many abortions have been done in America. And I mean, we just nonchalantly say almost 60 million babies. But I mean, in 44 years and 9 months, we've killed that many babies? I mean, you can't wrap your head around that. I look at Zoe, and her mother had an appointment at the Sioux City abortion facility, but the ride didn't show up. Or Zoe wouldn't be here. I mean, my family wouldn't even know what we're missing. But it would be such a sad existence without Zoe. And she is the picture of life. But there's 60 million more that are growing up in heaven. And heaven is a great place to grow up, but why not have a chance at life here on earth? We had a woman in Storm Lake, very prominent. Her husband was a surgeon. They would often travel to Papua New Guinea and faraway places, and she would come back and say, Planned Parenthood is the best organization in the world. She loved what I did. She made me feel like what I did there was noble. Because she said, women will stand in line at a Planned Parenthood tent to try to find out how to not have babies. But it was people like that that made me feel okay about what I did. And Planned Parenthood would have like a coalition with certain, they called them churches, but that's not really what I would call them. I don't want to say anything bad, but these people that were leaders of these groups that would write us letters and say, you know, thank you for protecting the rights of women. And we would frame those and hang them up so that we could justify every day going to work and doing what we did. The Planned Parenthood undercover videos came out about a year ago, and if you haven't watched them, you simply must. There's about 13 of them. This is Dr. Mary Gatter saying, I want a Lamborghini. They're haggling over how much they can get per part of an aborted baby. And it's real, and it's true, and it happens. So during my first years at Planned Parenthood, you know, I told you we pieced the baby together in the little thing. Then they had a big square sink. And they would dump that in there and then hit this plunger, and it went down this, like a big toilet sink. And I remember thinking, all that is in the sewer system in Des Moines. But in later years, they put them in little red bags with a twisty and threw them in the freezer. And I said, where do those go? Because in my mind, even at that time, I thought, I bet they're up to something with that. They would not tell me. But I have no doubt. So that's Dr. Mary Ganner. Here's a quote from a director that works in an abortion facility. Here they are again. We're going to get more per item than if we sell the whole body. And keep in mind that these people, here's Debbie Nucatola, these are top level Planned Parenthood people. They're not like the ones that work in the clinic. These are the ones that train abortionists. But this lady said, she's the one that said we crush above the thorax and below the thorax so that the heart, lungs, liver, thymus, all intact. $75 a pop. So they bill the mom. They'll bill Medicaid for any part of it they can. The meds, the lab, the ultrasound, and then they do this. So, pro-life. I'm pro-life. You're pro-life because you're here. Why are we pro-life? Why do we protect life? Because the Bible says we should. Because we have life. And we want everybody to have life. That's just common sense, right? We're made in God's image. He created us. He knit us together in our mother's womb. And He knew us before the foundation of the earth. We know this. Here's my favorite one. Choose life. It's pretty simple. Choose life. And we know that abortion is murder. Of course, Iceland, if you followed in the news, that is a country that is aborting 100% of the children that have that extra chromosome. They're trying to eradicate Down syndrome. Another fantastic picture of the sperm meeting the egg. And of course, the second the sperm and egg meet, there's life. The very definition of life is it changing? Is it growing? And it is. It goes to 2 cells, and then 4, and then 8, 16, 32, 64. I mean, it's a miracle. It's already a boy or girl. And all of its traits are there. It's alive. If they found one single cell on another planet, they would say it was life. But yet an unborn baby. I had a pastor at that same crazy church that wanted to escort women in. The pastor's wife did a whole study saying that we're not really alive until God breathes that first breath into us. I'm like, so the 6-inch trip down the birth canal means that we're alive, but before that we're not? Love this sign. I know 20 families that are ready to adopt your baby today. So we have 40 Days for Life going on not very far from here. When I used to work at Planned Parenthood, there's a guy named David Shedlock, and he would be in Des Moines. I'd be down there all the time for training or meetings or whatever. But he would be on the sidewalk, and he held the nasty signs with the pictures that we saw every day anyway. We already knew what they looked like. But he would be yelling and saying, "The blood is on your hands." I was terrified of him. I think he would have gotten further, at least with me at that point, if he would have been nice and just said, "I'm praying for you." And I might have still gone, "Rrr," but it would have been a lot nicer than how he was with all the staff there, because they despised him. And it actually made their case better, stronger, that, hey, the pro-life side is crazy. Look at him. You know, he's down here every morning yelling and screaming, and he's out of his mind. And so they kind of liked having him there. But someone quietly praying, they don't like that. Amen. If you touch an eagle egg, you will probably go to jail. And that is a great irony. It's a sad and pathetic fact. But, I mean, we love eagles, right? I love all animals. But seriously, you know, almost 60 million dead babies, but if you mess with an eagle, you're going to go to jail. Our laws are screwed up. I mean, our society has made what's wrong seem right. It's in the Bible. If you're pronounced dead when your heart stops beating, why are you not alive when your heart starts beating? Right? This guy, look at the ultrasound. He's just standing outside reminding women, look at the ultrasound. Because they don't. It's not offered to them. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, silence in the face of evil is evil itself, will not be held guiltless. And I know all of you are involved in the pro-life world, but I love to afflict the comfortable. And what is the next step, for you? What does that look like? The number of abortion facilities is declining. The number of pregnancy resource centers is going up. I am involved in the whistleblower lawsuit that you heard a little bit about. We don't really have time to go over that. But I will be here. We're going to enjoy a lovely lunch. And
Sue, can you give some details about what, if this prevails, this lawsuit, would you give a few details?
The whistleblower lawsuit that I'm involved in, remember when I told you that Iowa Right to Life, I told them and I thought they were going to fix it? Well, they ended up connecting me with an attorney from the Department of Justice, and I told him some of the stuff that goes on there. And he said, bigger than me, he connected me with a place called Alliance Defending Freedom. And I had never heard of it, and honestly, at that time, I didn't know Christian and attorney would even go in the same sentence. But alas, there's many, many Christian attorneys. So if there's somebody here that's a Christian attorney, God bless you.
Yes, we do have some.
But there's 3,000 allied attorneys all across the country, and they have picked up this case of questionable billing and fraudulent practices. And it's kind of like the frog in the water, it heats up slowly. I didn't know that what we were doing was wrong, the way that we billed, and just the wrong practices. I mean, we would ask a woman on Medicaid every time she got a cycle of pills for a $10 donation. Even though they turn around and bill Medicaid $35 a cycle. They're reimbursed around $26 per cycle, and then they get this $10 donation. And of course, they buy the pills for $2.98 through a big contract with the ortho company. That's a whole, I could talk for an hour on that. But yeah, so this little whistleblower lawsuit really has the potential to make a change in Iowa. And the things that they do in Iowa, they pretty much do all over, because Iowa is a model. They're very successful financially. But we got up to 28 abortion facilities there, which is more per capita than any other state, and now we are down to 9. So, but I've been talking to Teresa a little bit for the last year, because suddenly Maine has 17 brand new webcam abortion facilities, and there's been about 19 states that have banned it, but webcam abortion is happening in Washington, Oregon, Hawaii, Idaho, Iowa, Minnesota, and Maine. 7 places. And I remember speaking to the Senate committee in Arkansas, and a senior senator there said, "Oh, honey, we're never going to have that in Arkansas because we'll never let it out of committee." And I said, "Sir, with all respect, they're not going to ask you. They will move the equipment in the night if they have to. They don't put up ads because they don't want you to be reminded of it. So they don't advertise it. They only talk to women over the desk. So once they say, it's positive, you're pregnant, that's when they advertise it and make it seem very simple." So there's some things up here. Be active, be involved. I heard Teresa say that a lot of you have written to your papers, your legislators. Stand on the sidewalk. All of these things are important, and I think it's going to take all of them. But the battle really for life is going to be won in hearts. Just like mine was changed, that's how we're going to win this battle. But we have to stay active in the state houses and in the Supreme Court. And we have to stand up for our president, because, he goes out on a limb with some of the stuff that he does. And, our newspaper editors, write to him every day. And honestly, if I go to bed at night and no one has yelled at me, I think, Have I done enough today? Really? Thank you very much for having me. I'll be around if you have a question.